On the evening of the 13th of July, 1793, a young woman climbs a staircase in the heart of Paris. She is 24 years old. She is calm, and hidden in the folds of her dress is a kitchen knife she bought that very morning. She has talked her way to this door with a promise, a list of names, traitors to the revolution, that she says she can deliver. It is a lie. Behind that door sits the most feared man in Paris, working, as he always does, from his bathtub. Within minutes he will be dead. Within 4 days, so will she. And here is the part history remembers. She came to stop the bloodshed, and instead she poured gasoline on it. This is the story of how one perfect murder achieved the exact opposite of everything its killer wanted. To understand the murder, you have to understand the year. By the summer of 1793, the French Revolution had stopped being a hopeful thing. The king, Louis XVI, had been executed in January. France was at war with half of Europe. And inside the revolution itself, two factions were tearing each other apart. On one side, the Girondins, moderate republicans who wanted the revolution to slow down and settle into law. On the other, the radical Jacobins, who believed the revolution could only be saved by force, fear, and the will of the Paris streets. In June 1793, the Jacobins won. The Girondins were purged from power, and some fled the city. And no voice screamed louder for that radical turn than one man, Jean-Paul Marat. Marat was a doctor and a scientist who had reinvented himself as the most incendiary journalist of the age. His newspaper was called L'Ami du Peuple, the friend of the people. From its pages he named enemies, demanded arrests, and called for blood in the name of the revolution. To the poor of Paris he was a prophet. To everyone he pointed at, he was a death sentence in print. But there was something strange about the most feared man in Paris. He ran his newspaper from a bathtub. Marat suffered from a brutal chronic skin disease, a relentless, itching condition that covered his body. The only relief he found was to sit for hours in a medicinal bath, a board across the tub as a writing desk, a cloth soaked in vinegar wrapped around his head. The most feared man in Paris ran the city's most explosive newspaper from a bathtub. Picture a Bond villain who does all of his world-ending scheming from a spa day. Historians still debate exactly what the disease was. Scabies, eczema, dermatitis have all been proposed. But the effect on history is not in doubt. It put Marat in a bathtub, alone, reachable, every single day. It made the most dangerous man in France an almost perfect target. And if you want to know how a stranger walked straight up to that tub and why he never saw it coming, subscribe now. This is exactly the kind of story we dig up on this channel, the ones school left out. 200 kilometers away, in the town of Caen, lived a young woman named Marie-Anne Charlotte de Corday. She was 24, from a family of minor, faded nobility, reportedly a distant descendant of the great playwright Pierre Corneille. She had been raised in a convent, and she read Plutarch, Rousseau, the Enlightenment thinkers, the ancient heroes who killed tyrants and were remembered for it. Corday sympathized with the Girondins, the moderates the Jacobins had just crushed. And when the purged Girondin leaders fled to her region, Caen, she listened to them. In her mind, one man above all had turned the revolution into a machine for killing, Marat. She held him responsible for the September massacres of 1792, several days in which crowds slaughtered more than 1,000 prisoners in the Paris jails. Now, here, honesty matters. Whether Marat personally caused the September massacres is something historians still argue about. He had called for violence against so-called enemies of the people, and his words fed the atmosphere. But blaming one journalist for a mob is a story, not a proven fact. What matters for our purposes is that Charlotte Corday believed it completely. To her, killing Marat was not murder, it was surgery. Cut out one man, she thought, and you stop the bleeding of an entire nation. In early July, Corday boarded a coach for Paris. She was not a soldier, not a spy, just a woman who had decided, alone, to change the course of history. She took a room, and on the morning of the 13th, at the shops of the Palais Royal, she bought a knife. A simple kitchen knife with a wooden handle. Her original plan, reportedly, was public, to strike Marat in front of a crowd and let all of France see it. But that plan collapsed. Marat, sick and confined to his bath, simply wasn't appearing in public anymore. So Corday changed course. If the tyrant would not come out to her, she would go to him. She wrote him a note, promising information, the names of the Girondin rebels hiding in Caen. To a man who lived to expose traitors, it was the perfect bait. She came to the door that evening and was turned away. She came back. This time Marat, in his bath, heard that a woman had news of the traitors in Caen. He asked for her to be let in. For a few minutes they talked. She gave him names. He wrote them down and, reportedly, told her that those men would soon go to the guillotine. It was the confirmation she needed. He was exactly what she believed him to be. Then she drew the knife from her dress and struck once, a single blow to the chest. It was enough. Marat cried out for help, and within moments the most feared man in Paris was dead in his own bathtub. One strike. No second was needed. She moved with the cold surgical composure of the bride in Kill Bill. Walk in, one precise strike, done. Except there was no revenge montage waiting for her afterward, only the guillotine. And here is the detail that has haunted people for 2 centuries. Charlotte Corday did not run. She did not hide the knife. She did not deny it. She simply stood there, in a house erupting into panic, and waited to be arrested. She had come to kill Marat. She had no intention of surviving him. Marat went under in seconds. This channel won't, but only if you ring the bell, so the next dark case reaches you the moment it drops. The trial was almost a formality. In front of the Revolutionary Tribunal, Corday did not beg and did not break. She admitted everything, calmly, and said she had killed one man to save 100,000. She insisted she had acted completely alone, and, remarkably, the investigation never found anyone who could prove otherwise. On the 17th of July, 1793, just 4 days after Marat's death, Charlotte Corday was taken to the guillotine. Witnesses reported that she was composed to the very end. She was 24 years old. She died believing she had won. She had killed the man she blamed for the terror. She had given her life for the Republic. She was certain that history would call her the woman who stopped the bleeding. She could not have been more wrong. Because in killing Jean-Paul Marat, Charlotte Corday did not end him. She canonized him. Overnight, the radical Jacobins understood something cold and brilliant. A dead Marat was far more useful to them than the living one had ever been. The living Marat had been volatile, sick, hard to control. The dead Marat could be anything they wanted him to be, and what they wanted was a saint. Enter Jacques-Louis David, the greatest painter in France, a Jacobin, a deputy in the convention, and a friend of Marat. David organized the funeral, and then he painted the scene you have been looking at this entire video. In it, Marat is not a diseased, aging radical dying in a tub. He is smooth-skinned, serene, illuminated like Christ taken down from the cross, a fallen martyr of the people. It is one of the most powerful pieces of political propaganda ever made, and it worked. Marat became a martyr of the revolution. His portrait was copied and hung across France. His heart was reportedly embalmed and enshrined like a religious relic. Crowds mourned him with words normally reserved for Jesus. And the Girondins, the moderates Corday had died to protect, they were now the faction that had produced an assassin. In the months that followed, the Jacobins tightened their grip, and the reign of terror escalated into its bloodiest phase. Thousands were executed as enemies of the revolution, including many of the very Girondin leaders Charlotte Corday had hoped to save. It is the political version of Anakin Skywalker burning down everything to protect the one thing he loved, and destroying with his own hands the exact future he swore to save.
Now, a careful word, because history deserves it. Historians still argue about how much of the terror's acceleration you can lay at Corday's feet. The machinery of the terror was already turning, the Girondins were already falling, the paranoia was already rising. Marat's murder did not invent any of that. But nearly every account agrees on the direction it pushed events, not toward mercy, but toward blood. Corday's knife did not stop the machine. If anything, it handed the machine a martyr and an excuse. That is the terrible paradox at the center of this story, the paradox of the political assassination. You raise a knife to destroy an idea, and instead you give that idea something it never had while its enemy was alive. A face, a wound, and a saint to pray to. Charlotte Corday wanted to be remembered as the woman who killed the terror. History remembers her as the woman who helped it grow. So here's the real question, and I genuinely want your answer. Was Charlotte Corday a hero, a terrorist, or just a young woman 200 years too early and terribly, tragically wrong? Historians still can't agree, so tell me in the comments. She climbed those stairs believing one death could stop a river of blood. Instead, she gave that river a name to remember and a reason to keep flowing. The knife that was meant to end the terror may have been the thing that fed it, because history is full of people who were absolutely certain they were doing the right thing. And those, almost always, are the most dangerous people of all.